Hi, and a warm welcome to the Nightlight Podcast. Chris Glynn here, joined in the studio by John Lyall, and he's actually here with me in my studio in Kampala, Uganda. Nice to have you with us in Uganda, John.
We have a guest tonight on Nightlight.
John's topic on the program today is the revival of Rome, the final world empire. Sounds very interesting topic. Let's get right into it.
Okay, to start off with, many a commentary and Bible scholar or Bible teacher has tried to explain the world's final empire before the return of Christ in terms of a revival of the ancient Roman Empire.
Where did they get this idea from?
This idea is based, logically enough, on the prophetic passage in the book of Daniel, chapter 7.
Shall I read it?
Yes, go ahead, please.
I saw in my visions by night 4 great beasts, and behold, the 4th beast, dreadful and terrible and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces and stamped the residue with the feet of it, and it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. First, John, what were the beasts before it?
Okay, so in that progression of the 4 beasts that Daniel saw in this dream vision, it is clear that this 4th beast should be identified with ancient Rome.
How do we know this?
Well, for one thing, the various details about each of the beasts make it obvious which historical empire each beast represents.
And what does the first beast represent?
That beast is the lion with eagle's wings that are plucked off as it stands up and is then given the heart of a man. So that easily represents King Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonian Empire. Nebuchadnezzar was plagued with a form of insanity to think he was a beast until he had become humble enough to honor the God of heaven and to admit that, quote, those that walk in pride he is able to abase. So the Babylonian Empire and the person of Nebuchadnezzar are the obvious identification for the lion beast.
But what about the second beast, the bear?
Okay, the bear, with one side higher than the other and having 3 ribs in its mouth, the bear represents the next empire that ruled the Middle East, Medo-Persia. And it was a dual empire.
What does that mean, a dual empire?
That means that it was comprised of 2 territories, 2 different territories. In this case, it was the Persians and the Medes. The Persians came from the line of Shem, Noah's son. The Medes came from the line of Japheth, who was also Noah's son.
Interesting.
It was a dual empire in which the Persians ended up as the dominant partner over the Medes. The 3 ribs represent probably the 3 previous empires which had conquered the Middle East before the rise of Medo-Persia. That is, Egypt, Assyria, and Babylon.
Interesting. What about the 3rd beast? What does that represent?
That's an interesting one. The leopard with 4 wings and 4 heads, a fitting representation for the Greek Empire, whose speedy conquest of the Middle East world happened in only 10 years or less. And the 4 heads symbolize the breakup of the same empire into 4 main divisions after the death of Alexander the Great.
And of course, a leopard is a very swift, fast animal. So that represents the speed with which Alexander conquered the known world, right?
Yes. You'll notice the details fit very precisely, very, very clearly the empire that they represent.
So which empire followed the Greek Empire?
Well, it's a very obvious historical fact that the Roman Empire came after the Greek Empire and conquered the land of Israel and the Middle East region. Well, of course, that's the Roman Empire. And the description certainly fits in some ways. Strong exceedingly is one of the phrases used. Ancient Rome controlled the Mediterranean world for centuries by virtue of its powerful military and efficient form of government.
And the Roman Empire lasted 1,000 years, didn't it?
Well, the Western Roman Empire, maybe 500 years, and the Eastern Roman Empire, 1,500 years. But one feature that doesn't seem to fit is this passage in chapter 7, which says, the 4th kingdom shall devour the whole earth.
Of course, Rome didn't conquer the whole world, did it? Just the
world around the Mediterranean, basically. Right?
Yes, yes. But the Americas, most of Africa, and the Far East lay well beyond the jurisdiction of Rome. Furthermore, the description of the fourth beast seems embellished, as if it is describing some kind of hyperpower, something extraordinary in comparison to the regimes of ancient times. Such phrases as dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly, great iron teeth, devoured and break in pieces, diverse from all the beasts that were before it, nails of brass, shall devour the whole earth and shall tread it down. In addition, there are other details about it having 10 horns, 3 of whom get plucked up by the roots, and the presence of a little horn who shall speak great words against the Most High.
So this wasn't obviously fulfilled with the Roman Empire, so we're looking towards another world empire, right?
That's right, yes. In addition, Daniel noted that the fourth beast was diverse, different from all the beasts that were before it. That's in verse 7, and it's repeated again in verse 19. Ancient Rome differed from previous empires in its republican form of government, but otherwise Rome was not that much different from the regimes and cultures that had gone before. Their army used the same basic type of weapons as others had. Their religion made use of idols, just as previous cultures had. In fact, their gods were borrowed from the Greek pantheon of gods and were just given Latin names.
Interesting.
But if we think of the fourth beast as including a modern great power block, we would see a huge difference. Unimaginably powerful weapons, self-powered vehicles, didn't have to be pulled by a horse, electrical energy, broadcasting technology, religion practiced without the use of idols. And of course there are countless other ways in which modern culture differs from what existed in ancient times.
Right.
So after introducing the 4 beasts, the dream vision of chapter 7 goes on to picture this fourth beast as the final one to come before the return of Christ. We read,
I beheld even till the beast was slain, and behold, one like the Son of Man, Jesus Christ, came with the clouds of heaven, and there was given him dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all people, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed.
So from that, we know it is quite reasonable to assume that this fourth beast represents both ancient Rome and a modern empire, coming just before the return of Christ. That is, in some way, the ancient Roman Empire will re-emerge as the final empire to rule over Israel, the Mideast, and most of the rest of the world in these last days before the return of Christ.
Lighting your path through the end times. You're with Nightlight.
John, we may have cause to wonder, though, how can this fourth beast span such a long gap of time between the end of the Roman Empire and our modern day?
Well, this is not as unusual as it may seem. For one thing, God inhabits the eternal now.
That's right.
And what looks to us like a great length of time and like 2 separate events, to God, such things are seen as all part of the same event.
True.
If it helps, there is a saying I've heard about the nature of time, that time is God's way of keeping things from happening all at once.
That's really good. Time is God's way of keeping things from happening all at once.
Yeah. So sometimes, to better understand the Bible's prophetic messages, it helps to step out of the time dimension to which we are accustomed and view historical events in the way God sees them.
Yes, I see.
And we may consider also how in other prophetic revelations that Daniel had about the end of the age, the revelation always jumped from the ancient past into the distant future.
Do you have an example of that?
Okay, such was the case in Daniel chapter 2 about the revelation of the image between the ancient legs of the Roman Empire and the final empire of the feet before the return of Christ, which is symbolized, by the way, as a stone striking the image on its feet. There is a gap of several centuries.
That's right.
In Daniel chapter 8, the message about the little horn jumps from the Seleucid Empire of ancient Greece to the final modern empire.
Yes.
In Daniel chapter 9, the prophetic message jumps from the ancient Roman invasion by the Roman emperor to the modern invasion of Israel by the Antichrist. In Daniel chapter 11, the prophetic message jumps from the Seleucid Empire of ancient Greece to the time of the end.
Right, so you're saying that the fourth beast of Daniel chapter 7 is like a two-in-one portrayal of both the ancient Roman and the modern empires.
Yeah, that sums it up pretty well, yes.
But the question of how exactly to make that connection between the ancient and modern empires, it's puzzled Bible teachers and scholars for generations, hasn't it?
Yes, a key point to understand here is that much of the symbolism here points not to any physical similarity between ancient and modern empires, but to their similarity in spirit, what we might call spiritual geography, displayed in the beast-like nature common to both ancient and modern empires.
Spiritual geography, that's good. I haven't heard that term before.
What began with ancient Rome carries on in the final Antichrist empire. Powerful military, the republican system of government, demagogic worship of a Caesar-like character, and much of Rome's legal organization is used in the world today. Persecution against believers, invasion and destruction of Jerusalem and its holy place. These are not geographical features, but are some of the intangible features, the spiritual geography, we might say, that characterized ancient Rome and will carry on in the modern empire.
Right.
But that does not explain the physical geography of the fourth beast, as it transitions from ancient to modern times.
Can you explain that?
Okay, to explain this, many commentaries fixate on trying to fathom how the 10 horns feature of this fourth beast might show up as the modern continuation of the Roman Empire. In the early days, commentaries tried to envision the various barbarian tribes who invaded Rome as the 10 horns. In recent times, it was thought that the nations of Europe could fit this role, even though ancient Rome was actually comprised also of several nations from Asia and Africa.
That's right.
There was even a time in the 1980s when there were 10 nations in the European Union, but now that number has climbed to 27 nations.
Right.
So is there a better angle from which to view this mystery about the fourth beast? Well, if we look closely at chapter 2, that might help. That chapter 2 is the companion chapter to Daniel's dream vision that we are studying now in chapter 7. In chapter 2, the prophet Daniel and the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar both have a dream or vision of a great image that represented all the same empires that appear in chapter 7.
Right.
What was known as the fourth beast in chapter 7 is called the fourth kingdom in chapter 2.
Yes.
This fourth kingdom straddles both legs and feet of the image, which corresponds to how the fourth beast from chapter 7 symbolizes both ancient and modern empires.
Yes.
In the image vision of Daniel 2, the fourth kingdom starts out as 2 legs made of iron, and that's symbolic of the dual empire of West and East Rome.
Right.
And it continues into the feet. The body part of the legs represents the physical geography dimension. The iron, symbolic of the iron character of Rome, represents the spiritual geography dimension.
Yes.
And this spiritual geography dimension would correspond to the beast character of the fourth beast, who in Daniel 7:7 is described as exceedingly strong. And that's similar to what it says about the fourth kingdom in Daniel 2, verse 40, which is described as being strong as iron, because iron breaks to pieces and shatters all things. So in chapter 2, you see, it is a little more obvious that this fourth kingdom, which is represented by 2 different body parts, legs and feet, actually comprises 2 different empires.
I see.
Yet we would expect to find some kind of connection between the ancient Roman Empire with the final empire, reflecting the symbolism of the foot of the body being connected to the leg, and also the fact that the 2 empires are lumped together under the label of Fourth Kingdom.
That's right.
And it is worth noting about this image that Daniel's description draws considerable attention to the image's toes. Thou sawest the feet and toes, and as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, These 10 toes correspond to the 10 horns that are featured in the revelation of the fourth beast in chapter 7. And where are the toes? Not in the legs, but in the feet of the image.
That's right.
This suggests that the 10 toes or horns are a feature of the final modern empire of the feet and have nothing to do with the legs of ancient Rome. After all, toes grow out of the feet, not the legs of a person.
That's right.
It should be safe to assume, then, that the 10 horns of the fourth beast in chapter 7 are a feature that belongs to the latter-day revival of that beast and should not be connected to its first appearance in ancient times.
So, John, that leaves us still with the question, how does the ancient Roman Empire manifest itself geographically in this modern end-of-the-age era of history?
Okay, so just to review, that might help. The legs of iron represent the dual empire of West and East Rome, and the feet represent the final empire to come before the return of Christ.
Right.
We know the feet come at the end of the age because the stone, who represents Christ, strikes the feet of the image, destroying the whole thing and resulting in the establishment of God's kingdom.
Praise God.
Now, as far as chapter 7 is concerned, it envisions both ancient and final empires as represented in one single beast, whereas the parallel revelation in chapter 2 represents the same as two body parts, legs and feet. Here in chapter 2 it is clear that the common feature between the ancient legs of Rome and the modern feet of the final empire is the iron metal that runs through both legs and feet. The other metals in the image point to the authoritarian nature of those empires, all of whom conquered Israel and the Middle East world with their powerful armies. And the same is true of the Roman Empire of the legs, of whom it is said,
And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, inasmuch as iron breaks in pieces and shatters everything. And like iron that crushes, that kingdom will break in pieces and crush all the others.
That iron strength was certainly true of ancient Rome, and that aspect of the ancient empire continues into the final feet version of the fourth kingdom, where the passage goes on to say about the feet that even though the kingdom shall be divided, yet the strength of the iron shall be in it.
Yes.
Now, this iron component points to intangible features, the strength of military rule and the efficient republican government and legal system that characterized ancient Rome, and that will also characterize the rule of the final empire.
Right.
But this kind of republican government, which our world has inherited from ancient Rome, exists to some degree or other in most countries of modern times. The iron, since it represents an intangible feature of the fourth kingdom, the spiritual geography, does not represent the actual physical, geographical nature of the fourth beast, which is what we are looking for right now.
Right.
For that geographical side of things, we have to see how it is represented in the body parts of the image.
So what geographical connection is there between ancient and modern empires, something that would clearly pinpoint to the actual territories involved?
Okay, good question, yes. To find that connection, perhaps it will help to look closely at the parallel revelation in Daniel chapter 2 of the image. The peculiar feature that relates to our question lies in how the body parts of the image seem to reflect the geographical and chronological nature of the empires that ruled over Israel. To start with, we have the single head of gold. That's the empire of Babylon, and we know that because Daniel told Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, "Thou art this head of gold."
Right.
Next is the two silver arms and breast, the empire of Media and Persia. It was a long-lasting and dual empire, which is reflected in the symbolism of the arms. Next, the belly of brass, the empire of Alexander the Great. By the way, note that the Medo-Persian and Greek empires had almost the same boundaries, which seems to reflect the fact that chest and belly of the image have more or less the same boundaries. Okay, next, the two legs of iron, the empire of West and East Rome. It was a long-lasting and dual empire, as reflected in the symbolism of the legs. And next, the 2 feet representing ? One obvious conclusion from all this, the final empire would have to be a dual territory.
Yes.
A less obvious conclusion, the geography would differ from that of ancient Rome, because a foot is not the same as a leg. Yet, the final empire should be connected to the ancient empire in some way, because, of course, feet connect to the legs.
Signs of the times.
So now, John, the big question is, do we see any kind of an empire like this developing now in the modern world?
Yes, indeed. But first we should take note of how the ancient Roman Empire was divided into West and East, roughly between European and Asian territories.
Right.
And, for that matter, between two different cultures. In the West, the tribal territories were assimilated and adopted the Latin language and Roman Catholicism. In the East, the Eastern territories were once major civilizations. They kept their traditional customs and language, but they adopted Orthodox Christianity. So in our day, you see, we have the benefit of some historical hindsight that was not available in times past. In very recent history, we are witnessing the rise of a new and very powerful empire. China's Belt and Road Initiative infrastructure projects are uniting the Eurasian land mass. The powerful nations of Russia and China have become strong allies.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, Russia, according to the prophetic passages in the book of Ezekiel, chapters 38 and 39, Russia will invade the Middle East in the latter days to become the final power to rule over the Israeli nation. So Eurasia looks destined to become the next ruling empire, the final one headed by the Antichrist.
Wow, that's right.
This we can foresee will happen once the collapse of the American empire has come to pass.
And that's happening.
And how has this huge landmass of Eurasia been divided? The Ural mountain range divides European Russia and Europe from Asian Siberia and many other nations to the east, including China.
Right.
The Caucasus Mountains divide European Russia from Asian nations to the south, the Middle Eastern nations. Remarkably, it is similar to the East-West Europe-Asia division of ancient Rome. It is like a spread-out version of the ancient empire, but time-wise much shorter, according to several passages in Daniel and Revelation. And that's how the feet are, spread out in comparison to the legs, but much shorter than the legs. Anyway, I hope this isn't stretching the symbolism too much, but it does seem to fit.
It certainly does.
The following quote from a commentary done in the 1800s seems prophetic and sheds some more light on this peculiar modern-day geographical division.
Let me read it, John. It says, "With this fourth and last beast kingdom, we Europeans of the present day are most concerned, for we live under it, our civilization, language, constitution, laws, and politics being essentially connected with imperial Rome. Indeed, the Germanic Empire and the Russian Empire expressly profess to represent the Western and Eastern Roman Empire respectively. The title of the Russian emperor is Tsar, which is a contraction for Caesar. Out of its 10 kingdoms springs the Antichrist."
So that's interesting, isn't it?
Yes.
Even back in the 1800s, some teachers saw the ancient West-East division of Rome reflected in the geopolitical situation of their day.
Very interesting.
For them, that was the key factor to understand the geographical reemergence of ancient Rome. Of course, what they couldn't foresee was the expansion of that geopolitical situation to include in our day the entire vast Eurasian landmass.
Right.
In brief, the geographical shape of the future looks like this. The dual empire of ancient Rome, which consisted of European and Asian nations, will transform into a greatly enlarged dual empire of European and Asian nations. European Russia and some European Union nations in the west, and the Asian territories of Siberia, China, and Middle East nations in the east.
Yes.
The fourth beast of Daniel 7 and the fourth kingdom of Daniel 2 symbolize two empires, ancient and modern. What the ancient and modern empires have in common is their spiritual geography. That is, the beast-like nature and the iron-like military strength are the features that continue from ancient Roman times into the modern day.
Right.
As for the physical geography dimension, the legs and feet of the image illustrate the dual nature of the final empire, and it is connected to ancient Rome by virtue of being divided into European and Asian territories,
Yes.
which are like expanded versions of the ancient Roman Empire.
Wow.
And the fact that the foot is not the same as the leg illustrates the fact that the geographical locations of the final dual empire will differ somewhat from the ancient Roman Empire. And besides this, the geographical division, in addition, as there had been a cultural division between West and East Rome, so in the upcoming modern empire there is also a cultural division, mostly between the Christianized cultures of the West and the non-Christian cultures of the East, Islamic, the Buddhist, Hindu, Confucian, communist.
Right.
By the way, whether a nation has a Christian or non-Christian culture is not meant to be a value judgment in the eyes of the Almighty, and on the geopolitical level, what matters is how much a nation seeks for peace and stability in the world.
That's right.
Sad to say, in today's world, those nations who have Christian cultures are badly misbehaving in this respect. They should be the peacemakers, but instead have become the warmongers of modern times.
That's right.
Sad to say, they have forgotten completely Christ's teachings to love your enemies. So from what we have seen so far, could this answer the puzzling question of how the fourth beast in Daniel chapter 7 emerges as a revival of ancient Rome? The key in all this has been to link the information about the fourth beast in chapter 7 and factor it in with the information given about the fourth kingdom in chapter 2. Intangible features of ancient Rome are represented by the iron continuing from legs to feet. Geographical features of ancient Rome are represented and understood by the two legs of ancient Rome, West, East, Europe, Asia, changing into the 2 feet of modern Eurasia. Again, the same division of West, East, Europe, Asia.
So then, John, what about the 10 horns on the beast? What do they represent?
Okay, big question, yes. Since our conception of the fourth beast has undergone some expansion and includes a lot more than just ancient Rome, that throws a whole new light onto that question. The symbolism pictured in the legs and feet of the image shows us how to make the geographical connection between ancient Rome and the modern final empire to come before the return of Christ. And since the modern empire links to ancient Rome simply by virtue of it being the expanded version of the ancient West-East Europe-Asia divide, there is no need anymore to find some way to link those 10 horns to the ancient Roman Empire.
That's right.
In the huge landmass of Eurasia, there are many countries other than those in Europe or the Mideast to choose from. And we could add this small detail mentioned earlier. The toes of the Daniel 2 image, which are usually considered equivalent to the 10 horns of the fourth beast, do not come out of the legs of the image, but out of its feet. That is, they belong to the expanded Endtime version of the ancient Roman Empire.
Yes.
The power block that is growing now by leaps and bounds in the great landmass of Eurasia.
That's right.
And we should remember that the 10 horns are mentioned as a sort of clue to help identify exactly which territory will be the final manifestation of the beast.
Right.
And they are attached to its modern version, not the ancient version. And so they can arise anywhere from a vast territory that, from the looks of it, may stretch all the way from Europe through the Mideast to Siberia and China.
Nightlight, keeping you in tune with the times.
Isn't it remarkable how the end time scenario is unfolding before our eyes, and also how geopolitical history is lining up with what the prophetic messages in the book of Daniel prophesied so long ago. And it's reassuring to know that God has planned it out well ahead of time. And despite all the confusion and chaos, there is a plan and a predetermined end to the messy, chaotic world of our day, which will be followed by the glorious age of peace, the millennium. And that's a topic I think we should come back to also in the show, what we have to look forward to coming soon in the millennium. Good. Okay, thank you, John.
Oh, it was a pleasure.
And it's nice to have you right here in Uganda for a few months at least. Makes it very easy for you to come and pop into the studio and come by with another class. Looking forward to it.